Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend, Jacob Acquire. Today, we're going to jump right in with the head coaching hiring news and some other assistant defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator hires across the league that have transpired since last Thursday. The big ticket, the news highlight is obviously Ben Johnson landing in Chicago to be the next Bears head coach. He's bringing on Dennis Allen from the Saints last year to be his defensive coordinator. I think that's like a lateral move compared to Matt Eberflus. What are your initial thoughts? Do you think this is a huge boost for the Bears? Do you think that there might be a disparity between what Caleb Williams does well and what Ben Johnson is going to ask of him in the system? Will this be hand-tailored for the quarterback? I'm curious to hear your thoughts because we definitely thought Las Vegas was going to have a larger pull with Ben Johnson than.
Yeah, my first thought is this is a dilemma for you, Steven. You're the Ben Johnson guy, and as of late, you're kind of the anti Caleb Williams guy. But I think it's a good it's what you would hope for if you were a team with a young quarterback to have a creative play calling kind of mind. He's like cut from his own cloth. He's not a Shanahan disciple, so to speak. He's not a McVay guy, so to speak. He comes up with a lot of the stuff himself, and I think he really can elevate Caleb Williams to reach his high potential because he was taken number one for a reason. He obviously didn't have the year that I think Bears fans and other people in the media expected, but I think this is an initial good hire, and I think Dennis Allen is a really good hire for them as well because he's a pretty good defensive coordinator. I know you actually showed, or somebody reposted one of your play caller rankings from 2023. Like the whole season, the aggregate ranking, and for defensive coordinators, Dennis Allen was at the top, or defensive play callers. And obviously he gets fired this past year, but back in 2023 when things were more smooth sailing, he was near the top in that regard. I think they have talent across the team here for the Bears, and I would be excited if I'm a Bears fan because leading up to it was yesterday, right? Monday when he was hired. The week prior, it was like, oh, Tom Brady and the Raiders are going to steal him. Like, he's the favorite there now. Oh, the Jags are willing to fire Trent Baalke. He's the favorite there now. But the Bears were able to pull it off, and they did it with keeping Ryan Poles. Like, they didn't have to shake up anything there. I think that's a mistake because I'm not a big Ryan Poles fan, but we'll have to see how it turns out.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with this. I think when you look at kind of Ben Johnson's background, it's very interesting. He runs a lot of under center, which leads to kind of a mesh or marriage between the run and pass game, allows you to incorporate a little bit more play action. I'm curious with Caleb Williams operating a lot out of the gun, if we're going to see more of that in shotgun and see those play designs kind of ripple from there. It's interesting when you look at kind of all the different polls and why he maybe landed with Chicago. I think when he was going through film last year, he had a couple quarterbacks in mind if he were to get hired by, say, the Washington Commanders. I think the biggest difference with him was some of the reports and why he didn't take the second interview when the Washington Commanders front office and executives flew out to interview him a second time, that the disparity was he didn't want any part of Jaden Daniels. He either wanted Sam Howell, Drake May, maybe if Caleb Williams fell, but he didn't want any part of Jaden Daniels. And I think this is where he connects with the Bears front office because Ryan Poles and their front office didn't even bring Jaden Daniels in for an interview, which I think is a slap in the face. So I know there's a lot of media attention going on that now Ben Johnson, who didn't want Jaden Daniels, who kind of pushed back on the Washington job, just got beat by those Commanders. And the whole reason he's going to Chicago is to make Caleb Williams better than Jaden Daniels as a I told you so moment. So I don't know if that's the case with Ben Johnson. He obviously brings a lot of creativity, but the one thing to remember is since he's been calling plays from 2022 to 2024, the starting offensive linemen he's had, like back in 2022 when he started calling, he had guys like Jonah Jackson, Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker, Penny Sewell. Like 4 out of those 5 starters are definitely, like I would say, all top 10 kind of in their position, or you could argue. And so you can do a lot when you have an offensive line like that, even if you only have Amon Ra. Like back in 2022, they don't have Sam Laporta. They don't have Jahmyr Gibbs. They don't have David Montgomery. They don't have Jamison Williams. There are guys that they didn't have on this offense, but because of that offensive line, they were able to do a lot. Well, the Bears, their big issue this past year was interior offensive line. I think you can say their tackles are decent. I wouldn't necessarily say they're like, you got to write home about them and declare that they're on like a Tristan Wirfs or a Lane Johnson or Jordan Mailata or some of these premier tackle positions, but they're good. They're adequate. And so what he does with the interior offensive line, I think, is going to dictate a lot of what they can and can't do this year. And if Caleb Williams doesn't get the ball out of his hands and continues to hold on to it, we're just going to see bad quarterback play similar with Zach Wilson. Now, granted, Zach Wilson never had a play caller like Ben Johnson, but he also had a guy like Mike LaFleur who comes from the Shanahan tree, tries to give quarterbacks easy buttons. So it will be interesting to monitor just how this marriage, I've been rambling back and forth on kind of different connection points, but it's just one of those things when you take it back and look at it. I don't want to say that this is a home run until we start seeing it all play out, until we start seeing the identity that is trying to be installed in the offseason.
For sure. And the whole Jaden Daniels point, like if Ben Johnson didn't want Jaden Daniels after seeing what it is now, like obviously hindsight's 2020, but that's a strike against him to me. Like, and I know a lot of people were probably like, oh, they should have taken Drake May at number 2. I was one of those people, but it worked out. And if he's going to the Bears to try to spite Jaden Daniels, I'm not sure he's going to get the elite quarterback play out of Caleb Williams that Daniels has provided us so far. Like EPA wise, this is like far and away the best rookie season ever by a quarterback. To the point about the offensive line and the talent around the quarterback position. You were talking about the 22 year when he first got there. People forget Jamal Williams broke Barry Sanders' touchdown record for the Lions. Yep. And I think Gibbs broke that again this year. If you include the postseason and week 18, he had like 4 touchdowns. He actually jumped ahead to fantasy RB1 just because of that week because Saquon didn't play. So if you played in week 18, if you had Jahmyr Gibbs, you were eating that week. They hold the number 10 overall pick, the Chicago Bears, that is. And I was thinking about it earlier today because we're getting most of the draft order in by now because as the playoffs move on, teams get pushed into the bottom. And with Chicago, I'm trying to think like what's a good fit because I'm always, when you watch people, you're like, is this a good fit here? And what was it, 2023? I guess it was the 23 draft. They draft Jahmyr Gibbs, number 12 overall, to get that complimentary back. They have DeAndre Swift right now, who I believe was there for Ben Johnson's first year in Detroit. What if they added Ashton Genty, the 10th overall, get their 2 running back stars there? Or to your point, one of the top offensive linemen there. I think there's a lot of options for the Bears to go with there. And to keep Ryan Poles at that position, that's where I draw, like, that's where my hesitations start because you can say he pulled off the heist against Scott Fitter, and he did. He got DJ Moore, our second round pick this year, Caleb Williams, obviously, Tyreek Stevenson, I think is what their pick became, who ended up losing the Washington game. But all the other stuff, I don't feel like he's hit on. The trade for Montez Sweat and then extending him. Montez Sweat didn't do much this year. The Chase Claypool trade. So I'm interested to see how much input Ben Johnson has in the team building process. Is it going to be like a Matt Rule instance where he has a pretty high control or the final say over the 53-man roster? That's what I'm interested in. And I think we lost Steven here for a second. So hopefully when stuff catches up, everything will sync back together. But I can keep he got knocked out there. It is snowing a little bit in the Charlotte Piedmont area, so maybe he got a little snow. But I can keep talking until he texts me eventually to stop this. But yeah, I really like the Ben Johnson hire. I kind of wanted him to go to Las Vegas so he could really build his own team and his image, but we'll have to see. That's the big question to me because the Jets, I think we can lean in the direction of Aaron Glenn being the guy. The reporting is he's interviewing with them today, Tuesday, and they don't want to let him leave the building. So I think they can offer him a deal. This will be their second, or Glenn's second interview with the team. And so if he stays, and there's Steven coming back right on cue, but I was just talking about if Aaron Glenn, we kind of segued past the Bears there. if they really want Aaron Glenn to stay, they're going to have a longer opportunity to do so because there's snow in New Orleans today. There's never snow in New Orleans. Can you remember the last time there was? It was probably before we were born. But that's kind of how the Earth's weather works nowadays with climate and everything. And so the interview that Aaron Glenn had scheduled for New Orleans, where he came from prior to joining the Lions staff, that got moved to this weekend. It was scheduled for tomorrow, and I think the Jets have a big opportunity to keep Aaron Glenn there. Even if it doesn't work out today, maybe they can come back tomorrow and say, "Hey, we were wrong. Here's an extra 200,000 on your contract here. Just come stay here." I think they're in a really good position to hire Glenn if they want to. Obviously, since we're talking about Ben Johnson, I thought the natural progression would be to talk about the defensive coordinator of the Lions. And Steven's frozen again. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's just one of those days. I guess I don't know if I have a cold or something, but it's pretty rough there. I
There
kind
we
of see
are.
Steven now. Yeah,
It's I'm telling you, the Wi-Fi today is on another level. I know we were talking about Ben Johnson the last time I was a part of the conversation, heard the end of kind of the Aaron Glenn segment. From, I don't know if you said this already, Aaron Glenn stated that it seemed like the New York Jets was his top choice. The Jets are obviously really interested in him. Like you said, buying time with the snow in New Orleans, postponing their interview with him. There's a chance they could get a deal done before that interview ever happens. So I think that's definitely a high likelihood. I don't know if you went straight from Ben Johnson to Aaron Glenn. The only thing I wanted to say about Dennis Allen, you brought up the play caller rankings from 2023. He did finish the season ranked first. This year, after a 7-game skid, after starting the year 2-0, he was 21st in the defensive play caller rankings. Matt Eberflus, I think, actually finished in the teens before he was fired. The issue with Matt Eberflus had nothing to do with the defense being called. That was a top unit in the NFL the past couple of seasons. It had more to do with how he handled his head coaching responsibilities. I think Dennis Allen struggled with the same thing. So having those kind of minds, or a similar mind to that, still operating the defense, I think is a great sign. Aaron Glenn, I think, would get the Jets defense back on track. And then the only defensive play caller hiring, and I don't know if you've discussed this, that kind of probably has some relevance that people had prior experience in the NFL, is Lou Anarumo. He gets fired from the Bengals, and then he gets hired. And I don't know if I agree with this one necessarily. He gets hired by the Colts, who fired Gus Bradley. I'm not a big Lou Anarumo fan. I don't see a lot of talent on the Colts defense. And I think when he was successful in Cincinnati, there was a lot of talent on all three levels for him to work with. And the secondary, you had a lot of pieces that meshed well. If that doesn't come together in Indianapolis, I have a feeling that going into 2026, the Colts will just clean house completely. Shane Steichen, Anthony Richardson, obviously Lou Anarumo would be part of that. And then they're
Chris
confusing
Ballard.
Yep. I was about to say their owner, Jim Irsay, and I was like, that's
Right.
the owner, not the general manager.
He's a bit erratic. He might be out of there too. We'll never know. I don't know how Chris Ballard's still there, to be quite honest. He's not one of my favorite GMs, but I think the Colts right now had more talent than the Bengals did this past season. I think their line's has a bit more depth. I'm a big DeForest Buckner fan, and I think that they can. And they just invested a first-round pick in Leitu Latu as well. I think that they have building blocks for that defense. And like you said, it doesn't matter. Like, if the defense is good next year, but they're 7-10 again or whatever, it's getting cleaned anyway. Like, Steichen has to do the job as the head coach, as the quarterback guy, to get that team to move forward. On the Bengals note, the team that fired Lou Anarumo, it was really interesting. So last night, right around midnight, or a little before midnight, Ohio State became the college football national champions. They beat Notre Dame. The final score was a 2-score game because they got the field goal late. I don't remember the actual score. However, what I do remember is checking Twitter after I brush my teeth and I'm ready for bed. I see a Ian Rappaport tweet, and it was the Cincinnati Bengals are very focused on hiring Notre Dame's defensive coordinator, Al Golden, to be their defensive coordinator. And it was immediately after the game. So I guess they already had a deal in mind. Maybe he was a little bit too focused on his upcoming role with the Bengals to really lock in against the Ohio State Buckeyes, who it was Ohio State blew them away at the beginning, but Notre Dame had chances to bring it back, but they really faltered at the end with a key analytics moment. They attempted a field goal when they were down 2 scores, and even if they make it, they're still down 2 scores. And karma bit them. They missed the field goal, and had they gone for a touchdown and gotten a 2 point, the game would have been tied later in the game when they got their next touchdown. So you never know. I think Ohio State was winning regardless. This is one of the most talented rosters I've ever seen for college football. Definitely top five. I think they beat every national champion in the 14 playoff era except for 2019 LSU and 2020 Alabama. I think those are the two teams that could beat them. But this Ohio State team is loaded. When we get more into the draft, I don't know, like 4 or 5 weeks before the draft, you'll hear me talking about an Ohio State player every position breakdown we do because they had a dog at every position this year. Extremely talented. We'll have to see what happens next year.
Yeah, no, it's always great when you can end the season like this. I think around Thanksgiving, it seemed like this might spell the end for Ryan Day. I mean, you lose the game against Michigan, who I think at the time was what 6-6, 7-6, something
Something
like
like
that.
that. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, they end their season phenomenally, winning the game and then beating Alabama in the bowl game, and just kind of that compounding way to end their year is great for Michigan. But with Ohio State, like you go into the playoffs, and I mean, they steamrolled everybody to the championship. And like you said, Notre Dame had a couple chances there at the end. But when you play scared, you aren't going to win a football game. And I think that kind of sums up how that game ended. Notre Dame, you're down 16. Obviously, it's not an optimal decision. Or, well, not optimal in terms of like having a fourth down and trying to convert that, but you got to go for it. You got to push the issue and you got to take those chances because had they converted, had they gotten the touchdown, had they gotten the 2 point, all of a sudden now it's a game. And then it's, does Ohio State find a way to rally? And I think what was interesting is we saw a lot of back and forth with the playoff games this weekend prior to that. I think this is a good time to jump into the Chiefs and Texans matchup, starting all the way back with the first game on Saturday. And it went how we thought it would go. I know a lot of people were crying about the refs, I guess, selling. The game came down the 2 15-yard penalties that amassed to 30 yards. And the Texans lost by 9 points. And then you had other people complaining that, oh, the line's at 9.5 and they took a safety
Yeah.
at the end. And
If you're complaining about that, call the hotline. All right.
well, it's like if you're complaining about that, it's like the line was 8.5 all week. Like what? Like don't cry because on game day everybody starts putting more money on the Chiefs that the line now shifts. Like it's just it doesn't make sense. People get really caught up in the moment and what's happening now.
For sure. And to talk about the moment for this game, I watched all 4 games in their entirety this weekend, and this one was the worst one to me. Just not fun whatsoever. The if you're a defensive person, it was pretty fun. I think Will Anderson really got after Mahomes. There was the call, the roughing the passer that went against him. Obviously, that was one of 2 that were kind of iffy, but like you said, that obviously didn't control the game. The defensive line, or the defense in general for the Chiefs, I think was the story in this game. And we talked about it. We thought that this might be a defensive slugfest, like a 24-14 kind of game. They got after CJ Stroud. Sacked 8 times. The offensive line just got worked. Even when they picked up pressure, picked up stunts, it seemed like Stroud was almost in the seeing ghosts territory. He was pressured like a ton throughout the game. And there was this post after the game by the 33rd team. They're a big football media company. And it says 72.3% of the pressure CJ Stroud faced turned into sacks during the game. That is the highest percentage by any QB in a playoff game this century. So I think when you're looking at this, you have to, number one, look at the Texans O-line and how they performed, but also CJ Stroud, once the pressure comes, he turned into a statue. He didn't. Early in the game, he got out of the pocket and had 2 really big runs, and that set them up for their first score. But outside of that, he just caved when the pressure came in. And I'm not trying to make this a Bryce Young, CJ Stroud thing, but the one that comes to mind, the Chiefs game when somebody gets pressured, Bryce Young like picked up the pressure and dealt with it. I'm sure there's other games. Josh Allen dealt with the pressure when the Chiefs are pressuring him throughout the game. And I think when you get to the playoffs, and when we're talking about elite QB play, you have to be that elevator because On the other end of the ball, the Chiefs weren't really a juggernaut on offense, and I think that was the true difference in the game. Was obviously the O-line got destroyed, but if you can overcome some of the pressure, maybe take 40% of the pressures into sacks instead of over 70, then you have a better chance of competing in this game. Because overall, it just felt like as soon as the Chiefs got that first field goal, it was over. Like it wasn't even like they just got a 70-yard touchdown. It was all right. They're wrecking the Texans O line. It's over.
Yeah. I mean, the opening kickoff obviously spelled a kind of spiral that would become the game. What was interesting is there were different points where you go, okay, this could be a turning point. And like you said early on, it looked like CJ Stroud with a couple scrambles, extending plays, extending drives, was going to give the Texans a chance. But like you said, over 70% of the pressures get converted to sacks. Chris Jones on one of those first sacks completely blew up the right side, got right in the CJ Stroud's lap. And I think PFF, I would have to look and see how FTN charts it in terms of quarterback fault. But they said 6 out of the 8 sacks CJ Stroud took weren't his fault. They were very quick pressures. They weren't blocked. Didn't give Stroud a chance to, quote unquote, make a play. But when we talk about the other quarterbacks in the league, when we talk about top 5, top 10 guys, a lot of them have the ability to create outside of the pocket. So this past year, I made a metric called create rate. It pretty much looked at the efficiency of quarterbacks who end up breaking the pocket because of pressure, or they're just bailing to kind of get outside and create a different platform, maybe even scramble. And CJ Stroud was below guys like Bo Nix in this year's draft class, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. Heck, Caleb Williams, for as bad as his rookie season was a better creator than CJ Stroud. And you already guessed it, Bryce Young had a better create rate this year than Stroud as well. So when you don't have the ability to create outside the pocket, when your offensive line is banged up and not able to block some of these exotic blitz looks that Steve Spagnuolo is able to throw at these Shanahan-style offenses, you have to look at yourself in the offseason and go, okay, we got to fix our offensive line. We got to fix our identity up in the trenches and find a way to protect Stroud because he can't create otherwise. And so I think that creates an interesting conundrum for the Texans. Great defensive game plan. They were able to take away the Chiefs wide receivers, but the Chiefs, even though it was lackluster in terms of offensive performance, they were able to find Henry Toto, Azeez Al-Shaair out of position. Travis Kelce made a couple plays, and that's all they needed in this game. That's all they needed. And it's sad because the Texans, yes, they outgain the Chiefs by 100 yards. They don't turn over the ball. Whoop-de-doo. 8 sacks. I think it's like 2.5 sacks is like equivalent from a like efficiency standpoint as an interception. So when you almost have like 3, actually, I think it comes out to a little bit more than like 3 interceptions in terms of sacks. Like that's what's going to kill you at the end of the day. And that's what's not being talked about when the media goes refs and the Texans played a clean game. They got outplayed. They got beat by 9 points. They should have won this game, and they have a lot of soul searching to do in the offseason.
Yeah, they walked into Arrowhead and scored 12 points. You're just not going to win against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. They finished with 14, I'm aware, but the Chiefs did them a favor and ran backwards 30 yards to take the safety to ensure the victory, to get from 99 to 100% there on the final play. Yeah, I think going forward for the Texans, the focus does need to be on the offense because outside of the few lapses that Travis Kelce was able to take advantage of, I thought the defensive game plan worked for the most part. But on offense, yeah, the interior O-line, I think, really needs to be hammered. They have the 25th overall pick. And I think receiver is a big need for them as well. We went into the season thinking, okay, they have Nico Collins. He's probably top 10. I would probably say he's like top 8 right now. They had Tank Dell, who had the big rapport with Stroud. He's one of his best friends on the team. And they traded for Stephon Diggs. Well, Diggs is a free agent now, also coming off of an ACL injury. Tank Dell, he has an ACL and something else on just that. I think it was against the Chiefs, right? It was just a really rough play in the back of the end zone there. So he might not play early next season, if at all. They really need to focus on ancillary weapons outside of Nico Collins because they were having to get people beyond John Mechie, beyond Xavier Hutchinson involved. And when I can't remember the name of the person that CJ Stroud was throwing to, and they were getting covered by Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson, who's back now, he's healthy. That's an issue for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I think you can find secondary, tertiary options in terms of receivers, either in free agency or late day 3 picks. I think the focus does need to be the offensive line. When you see how Bryce Young's taken a step, when you look at just how some of these other quarterbacks have played, Josh Allen, phenomenal. I know a lot of people talk about Joe Brady, Josh Allen, a lot of the big names on the team. Aaron Kromer isn't talked about enough. He was big on Sean Payton's offenses in New Orleans, and he's been a big part of what the Bills are doing in Buffalo. So when you look at that and you look at some of the success, I think it really does need to start in the trenches, and maybe they need to hire a new offensive line coach. And I think you need to learn to mesh some of these concepts in with protecting the quarterback, because if you aren't able to keep him upright in the pocket, it doesn't matter who his wide receivers are. And I think that's what's got to be the primary focus.
For sure. I think overall in this game, we can say that with the week off, the Chiefs were ready. You know, they've been here before. Patrick Mahomes has played, I think, almost every non-Super Bowl game in the postseason at home, except for the AFC Championship last year. So they were ready. They knew what was coming, and they took the bye week and prepared. The next game that happened, the Saturday night game, they also had a 1 seed that had a bye, had time to prepare, but overall couldn't get it done against one, like your guy. You took the reins back in September and hopped on the Jaden Daniels bandwagon. He's taken him to the moon. Like, they're one step away from a Super Bowl. I think Big Ben was the last. No, that was his second year that he made the Super Bowl, right? So I can't even remember the last time a rookie QB. Actually, I think Purdy did, but anyway, high rookie QB, very actually talented. No disrespect to Brock Purdy, but Jaden Daniels led them to an insane 45-31 victory. We talked about in the preview episode on Thursday that the Lions can go band for band with anybody, and I don't know if the Washington will be able to overcome that. Well, they did overcome it, and they scored multiple times. They took a touchdown from Jared Goff, who got absolutely lit up by Frankie Louvu on that play, and they just ran away with the game. At the beginning, it was back and forth, but eventually, once the Lions would have turnovers and falter and not score every drive, they just couldn't keep up. And I think it's really fun watching Washington, a team that was spurned by Ben Johnson, as you said, be able to beat them and advance to the NFC Championship.
Well, it's not just the Ben Johnson spite. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, De'Ami Brown had quite the game.
Yeah, and he was like, oh, yeah, he's one of the wide receivers that got taken in front of me. Well, he outplayed you in this game, and that was a big reason why the Commanders walked away with a win, or commandeered a win, as one of the Detroit newspapers read the next day after the game. And I think what's interesting is Dan Campbell, I think he was a little cocky. You say at the end of kind of the Week 18 game against the Vikings, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Yeah, you'll see him in Cancun is what you're going to do, because you weren't prepared. You played you weren't mistake-free football. It was mistake football, and it was just turnover after turnover, miscue after miscue, and some of it just like happens. Like the initial fumble that Goff has in the red zone. Like, sometimes you get hit in a spot where you're trying to make a play, your arm's moving forward, and you don't have a good grip on the ball. That happens. The interception, inexcusable. You're trying to force something where there's a underneath cover guy, there's a coverage guy behind. Like, that is a small window to throw it in, and it ended up being a pick six. But what I think is interesting when we talk about this game is the Lions had the ability to score in droves. There were, I want to say, 3 points of momentum swings where I thought the Lions could then start running away with it. They never did, because Jaden Daniels always answered. So I think the 3 times that come to mind: Laporta touchdown, where the Lions go up 14-10, grabs it with one hand, mosses it right out of the air, looks like Rob Gronkowski with the arm brace. I mean, the crowd's getting raucous. And then what do? You respond with a touchdown. You go up 17-14. Okay, well, Lions get the ball back. They throw the pick six. You're up now 10 points. Or no, it was the 10 at that point. No, No, 24-14, 10-point
Yeah,
game. Sorry,
24-14.
I'm getting confused. Yeah, it was 14-10. They score a touchdown. They go up 17-14. You get the pick six. You're up 24-14. Now I'm back on my rant. So at this point, Jared Goff's out of the game. He's getting evaluated for concussion. You have Teddy Bridgewater in as the backup. Took him 3 plays to go 73 yards. You have a Jamison Williams touchdown. Again, momentum swing number 2. It looks like the Lions are back in this. It's a 3-point game. And then what did Jaden Daniels and the Commanders do? They drive down and score yet another touchdown to go up 31-21 in the game. But it's not over yet, because at the start of the second half, it looked like the Lions might rally again, because I think the Commanders go 3 and out. They punt. Lions drive down. Gibbs has another rushing touchdown, and it's all of a sudden a 3-point game. And that was as close as the game got for the rest of it, because what did the Commanders do right after that? Answered with another touchdown. Like, that is nails. That is poise, that when at 3 different moments, the Lions come marching back, come storming back, like they have on several occasions this year. The Vikings, the 49ers, like, you can go down several games where the Lions didn't necessarily have control of it early, but were able to rally back. And the Commanders had an answer each and every time. Like I don't know what else you can say about this guy. Like Patrick Mahomes had a better team around him in 2018 than what Jaden Daniels is working with, and it doesn't matter. And that's why I think it's interesting, and we'll talk about it more on Thursday. The matchup against the Eagles, it was split during the season, and the Commanders had a lead in the first game in Philadelphia. So this is a very interesting game, but Jaden Daniels right now, it's hard to say that there are any quarterbacks playing really better than him. I would say the only person you could say right now to the 4 quarterbacks still playing is Josh Allen.
Well, and I would say Josh Allen did not have a phenomenal game this past weekend. I think Jaden Daniels did. He's just been incredible so far. And you talk about each time the Lions come storming back, well, they would give the ball away in droves as well. 4 combined interceptions there. You mentioned the fumble from Goff. I said combined because Ben Johnson maybe went too deep into his bag and had Jamison Williams on a little trick play where he was passing. I don't think he needed to throw the ball. He could have got like 3 or 4 yards just running forward and then out of bounds. But he throws up like an apple pie that gets intercepted. And that was just the story of the game. And it's interesting, right? 2 weeks ago, we have a guy in Sam Darnold who is having a not a prima donna, but like a really good season. He was the guy who was horrible with the Jets, horrible with the Panthers. But he's saved. He's really good now. And then he crumbles under the pressure 2 weeks in a row. And now we have another QB, maybe another system or mid QB in Jared Goff, who throughout his time with Detroit, he's been the guy. He took Detroit to the playoffs and won their first playoff games in 30-something years. But now when the lights are bright and he's going against somebody who's probably a little bit better, or not a lot better, and Jaden Daniels in Washington, he crumbled as well. And it just makes you think maybe you do need a special talent at that QB spot to get it done, because Stafford, pretty big arm, Super Bowl. Like the most recent ones, Patrick Mahomes again, and then again before that, and then Tom Brady. You need a special quarterback, and Jaden Daniels looks the part so far. I'm really interested to see if he can get them past the Eagles, because you mentioned how they led when they were in Philly. Well, Philly also led when they were in Washington in that last game, and Daniels did deliver the game-winning touchdown, but it's been back and forth so far. But I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, no, it's going to be one of the more fun matchups this weekend. And I love that we have at the 3:00 point, because you have really the Mahomes, Allen. I think at this point it's like game 11. They've gone back and forth. I think the Bills have won all the regular season matchups. The Chiefs have won all the postseason matchups. And this is, I think, a really career defining moment for Josh Allen. Can you get over the hump? Is this like the Cam Newton, Russell Wilson in 2015, where you're able to finally just get that monkey off your back? So we'll see if that's the case. I think going into Sunday, the cool part from an aesthetic point is both games had snow. And that was really special to see, very cool to see. And in regards to the snow, the Rams travel to Philadelphia. Matthew Stafford is the Rams quarterback at the moment. And what's interesting is the last time that I think the Eagles played in a snow game like this, where it was truly coming down, the Lions were in town. Matthew Stafford was the quarterback, and LaShawn McCoy had one of the best games of his career in an epic showdown. And it's almost like deja vu, because instead of LaShawn McCoy, you have Saquon Barkley breaking not one, but two 60-plus yard runs that kind of, I want to say, paved the groundwork for them to head into the NFC Championship the way they did.
Yeah, like I think the story of this game was just the star power, mainly on the Eagles side, but the Rams certainly had their moments as well. Saquon Barkley, like you said, two 60 plus yard runs, over 200 yards on the day. It looked like saving him week 18 has really paid off for the postseason run. There's just not much more to say about Saquon. He's been doing this all year. And on the final run, like the 75-yarder one or whatever, he was getting the crowd hyped. He was like hitting his helmet on the way down the sideline because he knew nobody was catching him. And that was really cool to see in the snow. I think as well, Devontae Smith, he didn't have a great game like stat-wise. He didn't have the 200 yards or anything. But as a blocker, he went crazy. He had key blocks on multiple touchdown runs, including the Jalen Hurts one. He had a seal block on the outside that allowed Jalen Hurts to get to the end zone. By the way, Hurts looked very, very slow on that one. It reminded me of some of the ones when Cam would run, but he would outrun the people. I don't know how these people were getting outrun by Jalen Hurts. He looks like a linebacker with a pick six, but he got that one in. Jalen Carter on defense had a phenomenal day as well. But then for the Rams, Puka Nacua, he's turning into a stud. Like, I know he had the really, really great all-pro rookie season, but I think he's even better now. And we might be kind of overlooking him just because he missed, was it 6 or 7 weeks earlier in the year? He's a really, really complete receiver, and I'm really excited to see what he's able to do next year. Hopefully, excuse me, with a full healthy season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Puka Nacua is I would definitely say he's like a top 10 wide receiver. I think there is the argument case in point. There's just a lot of like, I want to say like older-ish wide receivers and like AJ Brown and a little bit older than that I would still say might be better than Puka. And then you have the younger crop with Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. I would even put Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas in a conversation where I would say maybe Neighbors and Thomas is like kind of that cut point where it's like maybe that's the level Puka Nacua is at. But he had a Julio Jones type catch. And what I mean by that is Julio Jones pretty much called game in that Falcons-Patriots Super Bowl, and then Matt Ryan kind of choked it away. And in this game, he puts him in a situation, you're down 6, you're now in the red zone, and Stafford couldn't get it done. And the large reason, and part of the reason why Stafford couldn't get it done, is Jalen Carter was in his lap the last 2 plays of the game. And I think that's a very special moment for him. This was why he was drafted 9th overall. If he didn't have the off-field issues, he would have been probably a top 3 pick. And it's because he can wreck a game in just a play or two. And so that was special to see. On the opposite side, the Rams had their defensive wrecker in Jared Verse, who was talking a lot of crap before the game about Eagles fans, did a walk around the stadium, trash talking them, and he backed it up. Guy had 2 sacks, 3 tackles for losses. He had an impact in not only the run game, but the pass game, and he's going to be a young rising star in this league. And that's just kind of the summation. I mean, you had all these stars kind of at play. And I honestly think moving forward, because I have a lot of questions and concerns about Jalen Hurts as being the quarterback on this offense. And is he the guy holding them back? With the Rams, I feel like if they find their next quarterback after Matthew Stafford with guys like Puka Nacua, with Jared Verse, with some of the pieces they have on both sides of the ball, this could become a really special unit over the next couple of years, which is really cool to see because it looked like they were kind of in a rebuild mode a couple of years ago after winning the Super Bowl. And now it seems like they've been able to retool and they're putting themselves in a position where they don't have to necessarily pick in the top 10 again. They can kind of do this the right way and clean it up a little bit as they go.
For sure. 2 completely different teams, right, from the Super Bowl win versus what they are now. Obviously out of the playoffs, but really put forth a good effort. The young defensive guys like Verse, Fisk, Kobe Turner from last year, the correct Byron Young, which they drafted. I know there's the whole story about how the Raiders put in the wrong Byron Young on draft night, but Verse for sure. I think Shue-In for Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was talking his junk, like you said, walked around the field. He backed it up with his play, but he didn't back it up with the W. And that kind of leads into the final playoff game that we watched. the Bills and Ravens fans on Twitter, it's been going on since like November, but they were talking a ton of trash leading up to this game. And with the conclusion, I think there's going to be less trash talk moving forward, but you never know, because that's the fun part about sports is you can just talk trash as much as you want because that's what it is. Obviously, the Bills came away with the win. Josh Allen has beaten his first division winner in the playoffs. Before that, it was all wildcard teams that his Bills had defeated. And it wasn't necessarily on his back. I thought he made a lot of the right plays, but looking at his passing chart, it was all shallow passes and one really deep pass to Shakir early in the game. The snow might have affected that game. It was a little slippery. I know Lamar had trouble holding on to the ball on one play, but this one aesthetically definitely wasn't as pleasing as the Eagles and Rams game before it.
No, it was like when you play the snow mode in Madden, where it's like the field's just covered, but it's not like the snow's all coming down.
It was like ice. It was like ice, kind of, not snow. Yeah.
And so it definitely gave it a clean look, that January playoff football feel, but it wasn't nearly as good as the Eagles-Rams game from that standpoint. From an overall game, I think this was better. And going to your point about Josh Allen, he didn't necessarily do a lot, but I think that was part of the Bills' game plan coming into this, is the conditions are going to play a factor. Let's not be dumb and reckless with the ball. And I think when you look at the Ravens and you look at some of the turnovers, it's Lamar trying to make a play in the pocket that causes the fumble that led to a score. And then before that, he has the interception. And I want to say the interception really regards to the elements, it had more to do with the pressure that was thrown in his face, and he was trying to guess where Bateman was going to be, and Bateman just cut it short, and the safety was able to make a play on it. And plays like that happen. But I think when you go to the Mark Andrews ball handling and just those kind of my little details that we noticed throughout the game that we're nitpicking. But I think what's interesting, and I want to pivot this away from the game and kind of the result and the discourse that's come from it. And I want to kind of bring up Nick Wright's Twitter post. A lot of people have had beef with it, but he kind of calls out Bill Barnwell, Ben Solak for like talking about this guy as being one of the best quarterbacks over the last 2 years, and he deserves MVP. If Aaron Rodgers hangs it up, he has more combined first-team All-Pros than everybody else in the league currently. And just all this propaganda that like he does all this in the regular season, but when it comes down to the postseason, it's like we're not surprised that he, I guess, chokes or cracks under pressure. I don't know exactly what the point was, but did this guy not watch Peyton Manning's career? Like,
exactly.
First 7 years, Peyton Manning's 3-5 in the playoffs. His 3 wins, 2 of them came back-to-back years against the Denver Broncos at the time. And if you can name me the quarterback for the Denver Broncos in 2003 and 2004, please let me know, because it's not a Hall of Fame Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. And then the other one was the Kansas City Chiefs back in. They got mollywopped by a bunch of teams. They didn't look good. And yet Peyton Manning still had 2 MVPs to show for it. Like at the end of the day, you can be one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the NFL and not get it done in January and February. I think what we've seen from Lamar over the past couple of years, though, does show growth. I think the moment was too big for him early on in his career. And I think now he's seizing those moments. He's making plays. He's keeping his team in it. I mean, they were right there up to it. And Mark Andrews catches that 2-point conversion. It goes to overtime. We have ourselves a true classic in that sense. And that's just not what happened. And sometimes the variance and the luck goes that way. If they don't have the fumble, if the 2-point conversion isn't dropped, maybe the Ravens pull this off and we have a completely different conversation and discourse about Lamar. And I don't think that's being talked about enough. And I think it's very frustrating because a lot of people leading up to this game were going, let's not tarnish these 2 guys' legacies. They still have a lot of ball left to play in their careers, barring a major injury.
Yeah, I think anybody who has 2, presumably a third MVP on the way, isn't 100% at fault when his entire team loses a playoff game. We got to think that during the regular season, you're allowed to make mistakes, right? And although some of these MVP players are playing at such a high level that we only see the highlights and stuff like that, they still make mistakes. And once it comes to the playoffs, you can't make any more mistakes. And it's very hard to play at such a high level. That's why somebody like Patrick Mahomes is such an anomaly, because he doesn't really make the mistakes at all in the postseason. But I think pinning all the blame on Lamar just for this game is a bit asinine. Like, obviously, one play doesn't mean the entire game, whether it's at the beginning or the end of the game. But it's hard to look past the 2 point conversion play, which was an excellent play by Todd Monken, by the way. Mark Andrews got open, and I guess just the icy conditions, the slippery ball, he couldn't hold on to it. They walk away with the loss. How do we talk about Josh Allen if they ended up losing this game? I think he didn't have any touchdowns. I gotta look at that, but he
Josh
might have
Allen,
had
he had the one rushing.
the one
I don't
rushing.
think he
You're
had
right.
passing.
But yeah, quite a pedestrian game from him as well. I know there were no turnovers, but if they had two rushing touchdowns, excuse me. But if they walk away from this game as the losers, this was in Buffalo, right? Like, what would the discourse be around him? And I think it's hard to, especially when it's two great QBs going against each other, it's hard to really come away with the full picture when somebody has to lose. It's just like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady early in the career. Tom Brady crushed him every single time. And
Yep.
that's no disrespect to Peyton Manning, who would eventually be a multi-time MVP, multiple Super Bowl winner off the backs of our Carolina Panthers for one of them. But he just went against Tom Brady. Like, there's just nothing you can really say there. And to that point, when we talk about Josh Allen next week, if the Chiefs do end up pulling off the win there, it's like, yeah, he loses all the time to Mahomes in the playoffs. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's the greatest guy of our generation, possibly on the way to the greatest ever. I'm not going to discount Josh Allen for losing to that guy. Like, it's hard to, I guess, to have a fully objective view walking into it. Because, yeah, like you said, even when you go into this saying we're not going to tarnish these guys' legacies, that's the first person you think of when you say, oh, they lost, it's his fault.
Yeah, and it stinks that that has to be the narrative. Like, why can't we just appreciate their greatness? And maybe their time isn't now, but it could be coming soon. And what's interesting is this almost three-peat by the Chiefs. They're 2 wins away from three-peating. If they pull that off, what started it was a lean year from Kansas City. They
Yeah.
ship out Tyreek Hill. They focus on the trenches. They prioritize what they need to prioritize, and it's worked out for them. What happens this year in Buffalo? They have a lean year. They ship out Stephon Diggs. They prioritize the offensive line. Everybody, for the most part, stays healthy on both sides of the ball, and now they're in a position to win it. I think in a couple of years, when the Ravens have to kind of give themselves a look in the mirror from a cap and roster standpoint, that they could go on a run similar to this. And then if Josh Allen say he wins it this year, Lamar Jackson wins it in a couple, when we look back at their legacies, this just looks like one of those all-time great games. And Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills just had the upper hand in it. Like you said, somebody has to lose. That's how these games work. It's how these situations work. And it's frustrating that it always has to get personal, and it can't just be an appreciation of watching greatness and something we may not see in a long time.
Yeah, I think we will get to see, hopefully, a good matchup between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes this upcoming week. Like you said, I think this is the sixth time they will have met in the postseason. Maybe fifth time. I know the graphic you're referring to is like their last 10 matchups, 5 Chiefs wins, 5 Bills wins. They've both allowed and scored 251 points
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Reminds me of for I don't know. It was during our entire time in college. Whenever Duke and Carolina would play, they'd throw up the graphic. It's last 100 games. Carolina 50, Duke 50. Duke points is like 26-82. Carolina's points is 26-81 or 26-83. Whoever won that game would go up one, and so on and so forth. It seems like that. It just seems like the Bills win the regular season, the Chiefs win the postseason. We will have to see if that changes. But I think we're getting into takes territory here, and hopefully we can get out of here before another Wi-Fi mishap. So I'm going to fire away. We talked about Ben Johnson. I said a couple weeks ago that I thought the Jags were the spot for him. You said last week that the Raiders were the spot for him. We both missed on that one. So I'm going to try to repent and say Liam Cohen is going to be the guy. He's going to hop on Interstate 4, drive past Orlando, maybe stop at Disney, then hit I-95 and drive up to Jacksonville and be their next head coach. I really think the Bucks are making a mistake by not retaining Liam Cohen, by not promoting him. Excuse me. We talked at length about how I think the performance by the Buccaneers was quite indicative of what Todd Bowles is capable of as a head coach. Again, they forced no turnovers or punts against Washington. So I think Liam Cohen will leave the building. He will go to Jacksonville, and hopefully Bowles can strike gold a third time with a play caller that can maximize Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. I've seen the rumors that if Liam Cohen leaves, maybe they bring in a guy like Chip Kelly, and that might be fun to watch.
Who just won a national championship with Ohio State.
He did. So his return to the NFL seems likely, and it'll be very interesting. I've heard rumors from some Pats beat writers. Maybe he ends up in New England with Mike Vrabel. That's just someone to monitor over the next kind of couple weeks, couple months when positions are getting filled out. Does he land somewhere in the NFL? I like that one with Liam Cohen. I think he would fit really well with Jacksonville. I think if Dallas made a move for him, it would be really fun to see some of the designs he would have with Dak and CD. So I definitely like that. For me personally, I'm shocked. I'm shocked by the front office from Tampa Bay. I don't know if Jason Light has a lot of say with some of the head coach hirings or if that's more the ownership group there. And that's again, sometimes your hands are tied on that, even if it's the smart move, because 3 division titles in a row speaks to owners being in the playoffs, winning a couple games, having a Super Bowl in the past half decade. It's some of this like being afraid to go away from this continuity or just winning football to try to be better. I think that's scary because, again, you're playing scared and you're not playing to win. My take for this week on Tuesday, I said it last Thursday. I thought the Lions would win. I think last Tuesday I said all the home teams would win. 3 out of the 4 did. The only team that has won on the road this postseason are the Washington Commanders. They are 2-0 on the road. Everybody else in the playoffs this year is 0-8. I think that streak continues this week, which means the Chiefs win and the Commanders beat the Eagles. So that's my hot take there, is I think the Commanders stay as the only team to win on the road. And I think that's just large in part because this is a team that feels right for destiny. And I try to shape this Twitter post. I know you try to call me out on that was a little cheesy, but looking at a wild card team that is this devoid of talent that has gone on a special run like this, I don't think we've seen since the 2007 Giants with Eli Manning. They didn't have a single Pro Bowler on that team. And obviously they have an all-pro and Frankie Louvo on the defense. They do have a couple players that have stepped up. But for the most part, this is a team that won 4 games for a reason last year. And to be in this position where they're a game away, I just think they're destined for it. They're playing mistake-free football on offense. They're playing opportunistic on defense. And I think those two things and getting hot at exactly the right time in the year, I think it leads to them playing for a ring in 2 weeks.
I like it. I'm a big believer in destiny and fate. So when the stars align, I could see something like that happening. I thinking about it, I didn't know that they were the only road team that has won in the playoffs so far. But when you picture it, it's like, yeah, all the home teams win. The Chiefs have won all of them. The Bills have won all of them. But yeah, I really like their chances. We'll talk more about that. Like what I think is going to happen on Thursday. I think we're going to hype up all the stuff just for it to be another repeat Super Bowl. Just like last year, I was like, oh, the most fun matchup I think would be Ben Johnson's Lions and Lamar Jackson, the MVP, and Todd Monken and Mike McDaniel. And then we end up with another repeat with the Chiefs and Niners. I think that's what's going to happen. But hopefully we get a little bit more intrigue this year. I think that's going to do it for us. My voice can barely keep up. If you've made it this far, thank you for suffering through my nasal stuff here. Thank you for dealing with the Wi-Fi stuff that happened. I think it was around the first 10 minutes. After that, it was smooth sailing. But we will be back on Thursday, hopefully sounding better, breaking down the 2 championship game matchups and probably more coaching news. I would think somebody gets hired between now and then. But until then, if you're in Charlotte, stay warm, stay safe. And if you're across the country, listen to the pod and keep pounding.